The following documentary deals with subjects that may upset certain members in the audience, as it presents possible interpretations of historic facts. The conclusions presented here are a matter of opinion. The evidence is real. In the 14th and 15th century after Christ, there lived a visionary overflowing with talents, Leonardo da Vinci. Like an alchemist's crucible, he gathered art, science, the occult, music, poetry, cooking, the endless search for answers, and the celebration of life. His name was a symbol for his times, one of the most vibrant in the history of civilization, the Renaissance. Always carefully watched by religion, Leonardo tried to uncover the magical meaning of the world. And that's why he was much more than an artist. He aimed to understand the very mechanism of life and to defeat death. From the time he started painting until the present, the third millennium after Christ, he has been damned as a heretic, an occult scientist, and an alchemist time and again. And time and again, he managed to dodge these accusations.
It was not easy for someone who lived when and where Leonardo did to avoid accusations like these, especially when Leonardo might well have been all three of these things: a heretic, an occultist, and above all, an alchemist. In today's chapter, we will follow Leonardo's footprints down the paths of forbidden knowledge into Leonardo's esoteric world.
The dark art was spread through symbols, basically because they were forbidden sciences, but also because the secrets conveyed could not always be put into words. Formulas that attempted to transmute elements, invoke angels, generate life. How could such formulas be named? Although generally hidden in pictorial work, these secret symbols and messages were sometimes found in the design of buildings and even some Christian cathedrals. Masters of the art of concealment since the time of the Crusades, the Knights Templar inspired several temples whose misshapen forms alluded to ancient symbols, pacts, and religious oaths.
Although alchemy has been regularly and unequivocally refuted by science from as early as the 4th century, the very word makes us think of hidden paths, sealed doors, and well-kept secrets. The word alchemy literally means black earth and dates back from ancient times. Its aims have much in common with modern-day medicine, biogenetics, and even physics. Indeed, discoveries such as cloning, DNA, and the energy from black holes are more connected with the aims of the ancient thaumaturgist than religion or science have ever admitted to. The very mention of the word alchemy alludes to spiritual searching, mysteries, and formulas for transformation, considered the exclusive terrain of God.
In vulgar terms, alchemy tries to find a formula to transform any common metal into gold. But that is just a metaphor for much deeper quests. Some of alchemy's principles are found in a book called Premio by Plato. There, the Greek philosopher asks himself what the universe is made of and who created it. His answer is that the world and life are made up of 4 elements: fire, water, air, and earth, in a certain proportion. Indeed, proportion is the 5th element that serves to bind all the others together. It is the soul, the essence of life. Discovering this sacred proportion was the aim of the alchemists. With it, they could find the elixir of youth, the secrets of eternity, the migrating soul.
It is not far-fetched, then, to find hidden symbols in Leonardo's work. More than 550 years later, his messages still seem to us like knowing winks. A subtle affirmation that history was never really as it was told. That light is more than they told us it was. That God is represented as much in the proportions of a flower as in the dome of a cathedral. Let's take a look at what might be considered Leonardo's most revolutionary piece, Adoration of the Magi, a set of cryptic messages and mysterious techniques. Although artistically this painting is 5 centuries ahead of its time, metaphorically it formulates enigmas and readings that we may never be able to decipher.
As if in a nightmare, strange characters are on the fine line that separates life and death. Truncated stairwells that lead nowhere. Unfinished figures, ghosts. Runaway horses. And the baby Jesus at the center of the scene. Around the group at the center of the painting, there are heavenly messengers that take the form of marvelous creatures. Some are smiling, but others look preoccupied, serious, as if this entire scene were dubious, not a magical and secret occurrence. The king's court in the distant background seems to be in a state of great unrest.
Christmas is associated with the angel's announcement and the joy caused by the birth of Jesus. Leonardo, however, depicts a startled and above all uneasy crowd. What is really happening in this version of the veneration of the kings before Jesus?
The kings are not depicted as they usually are, but rather like terrified old men. The other visitors to the manger are creatures somewhat between life and death. Although faith is felt throughout the piece, doubt and uncertainty are also present, like a dagger that puts a strain on the situation. There is a feeling that something dreadful is about to happen. The characters seem blinded by a dull light, where there is no place for life. There is nothing of the traditional epiphany. Instead of bliss, the faces of the kings and shepherds look stricken and imploring. And the focus of the piece, the baby Jesus, looks bleak and severe, almost adult-like. It is not easy to find the joy that one would expect in this scene.
The Adoration of the Magi is one of the strangest pieces from Leonardo's entire body of work. For years, it was considered unfinished. We now know that in making it, Leonardo used techniques that the artists and critics of his time could not understand. Many have called this piece unfinished, without grasping the allegorical nature of the figures. What is Leonardo telling us through these imploring old men who seem closer to hell than to earth? What is the mysterious Leonardo telling us by using enigmatic expressions that confuse a scene that no longer held any secret? Adoration of the Magi is laden with esoteric signs that, as the alchemist said, can only be found with those who have eyes to see. Let's do what the alchemist did then. Let's look with eyes that see.
The unreal atmosphere and violent climate of the landscape in the background give the painting a disturbing feel. On the one hand, there are the well-defined lifelike figures, and on the other, the blurry faces of the kings who look doomed. In the background, impossible angels, vague gestures, imprecise actions. The landscape is Dante-like. Life and death are divided into lights and shadows, and the overall feeling is one of confusion and pain. Chaos. In this painting, Leonardo da Vinci, the explorer of limits, seems to have come upon a quandary.
What is the precise boundary between life and death? What lies there? What was death for Leonardo? A parallel world? A cosmic evolution? Or just freedom and release from an imperfect body?
While I thought I was learning how to live, I was learning how to die. Leonardo da Vinci. For most ancient religions, horses were connected to the world of the dead. Stairways also allude to the soul. On them, one ascends to heaven or descends to hell. In this painting by Leonardo, the truncated stairways mean that access to heaven has been cut off. The tumultuous horsemen announce disease and death. The background speaks of the apocalypse.
The limit between life and death became an obsession for Leonardo, one that would mark the course of almost his entire life. An early obsession that he could never get rid of.
Images of life and death trapped in a fleeting instant. Only a keen observer of life could approach the other side of existence in this way. And observe with an unyielding third eye the talent of an artist and the curiosity of an alchemist.
At dusk, Leonardo was often found lost by caves, observing falcons. Other afternoons, he could be seen at markets near the stall where birds were sold. He enjoyed the simple act of observing life. But he could also be found at a hospital with old men whose skin, dry as parchment, announced the end of life. Supposedly keeping them company in the final hours, Leonardo closely watched the final seconds of life.
Wherever there were contorted mouths, entranced expressions, ecstatic souls, you could find Leonardo with his notebook, always obsessed with capturing the very moment that life left the body, finding the exact proportion of all things, the essence of life, the soul, the basic concerns of the alchemists. Is it conceivable that a man as bold and curious as Leonardo da Vinci, a man who questioned everything, an androgynous free thinker, a master of mixture and potion, would not venture down the roads of alchemy? But alchemy was heresy. But practices that do not respect traditional dogma have always been labelled as heresy, even when they search for knowledge and are guided by reason.
Alchemy came to be called the black art in order to discredit it and persecute those who practiced it. The search for the soul was the exclusive dominion of God or his representatives here on earth, the pastors of the flock, the guardians of good and evil, the members of the all-powerful church.
To avoid trouble, Leonardo denied being an alchemist. He claimed he was a mystic scientist and a naturalist. But once the authorities, satisfied, left him alone, his easel became his table, his palette his scales, and his canvas a melting pot. Leonardo da Vinci aspired to the highest creation imaginable. By inverting God's process, he sought to reach the soul through mechanics, to mix the elements of the universe, to create a perfect and living machine.
Although aware of the prohibitions, Leonardo moved forward in his research. His will was stronger than any threat. He was no stranger to pretending, and he moved through different social circles like fish in water. The famous artist could well delve into a secret world if in it he might find the answers to his primordial questions. He was at peace with God and with art, but he was fated to research, wherever this investigation might lead him.
From the most ancient times, it has been taboo to touch corpses. Dissection was not just forbidden, it was considered a diabolic act. Catholicism, as well as many other religions, forbade the study of an inert body. For Leonardo da Vinci, though, death was not a brutal fall into emptiness, but the harmonious culmination of existence. For Leonardo, a body bereft of life was a broken but wondrous machine to be studied.
Leonardo discovered that the spinal column consisted of 31 vertebrae and not 30, as had been previously believed. This final vertebra was essential to understanding the spinal column as a whole. Leonardo discovered the key to joints in the human body, and he kept it secret, as if it were dangerous information, an alchemistic equation glowing in the cold of a dead body, the first chord in the symphony of God.
Leonardo became a frequent and clandestine visitor to the hospital mortuary. The hours of darkness seemed most appropriate for these visits, when his figure could be seen slipping past, hooded and silent. Perhaps it bothered him to enter the morgue, like a conspirator and not as a scientist. But this initial rush of adrenaline was just the prelude to his true fascination, which was reserved for later. The covered bodies, decomposing quickly, the candlelight, the final gesture of a departed life, the potent silence, his feverish hand on his notebook, the odor that rose like a fog.
An absolute prohibition, a religious taboo, a possible accusation of heresy. These were not enough to stop his drive to investigate. He had spent years preparing for this task. His mentor, Verrocchio, had said time and again that a good artist must know the human body in depth. Know how an arm moves, or a facial muscle when a person cries, or the lines that form on a face with the passing of time. But Leonardo went beyond anatomy and delved into dead bodies to discover the traces of the last breath.
But like a good Renaissance man, Leonardo was not satisfied with the answers offered by faith. He looked for his own answers. What was left of life once life had departed? God was not going to tell him how to live his life. With respect to death, the secret of death might be revealed, but he needed to search a little more, if they'd only let him search a little further. Measuring measuring, recording, counting, weighing, measuring harmonically. It was said, "Give me a fulcrum and I will move the world." Leonardo might have said, "Give me the exact measure of things and I will tell you the true nature of the soul." Leonardo obsessively measured and recorded everything that came into his hands, from the ingredients of a meal to the angle of the rays of light hitting a village, or the relation between a man's limbs and the weight of his heart. What is the true formula for the universe?
Leonardo observed the course of running water, the flapping of a bird's wings and the shape of a smile with the same rapt attention. Everything has a mechanism. All the mechanisms in the world can be reproduced. All that is missing is a formula. Leonardo da Vinci.
The search for the perfect proportion was a constant in Leonardo's life. Everything he did was touched by the mathematics of music, the geometry of nature, astronomy, even the perfect combination of pleasures. He searched on and on, constantly the age-old question echoing in his head like a beating drum. Did God use a certain formula when he created man and nature?
The key is a mathematical formula, a formula that God used to create the world and man, the sacred formula of proportions. Leonardo devoted his life to discovering this formula, and one of his most successful pieces, Vitruvian Man, is a faithful reflection of that obsession. In this piece, Leonardo da Vinci depicts complementary compounds in a harmonic whole. The meeting of opposites is one of the basic principles of alchemy. The Vitruvian Man figure brings together man and world, the dynamic and the static, the square and the circle. All parts tend to join the whole in order to escape, perhaps, incompleteness. Leonardo da Vinci.
Leonardo perceived that the four elements that make up the world, earth, air, fire, and water, have a cosmic vibration. The soul perceives this vibration through the five senses. Every atom in the universe has an energy that can be translated into an audible frequency. This is called music. It is for good reason that music is called the universal language. Music is the key to the soul's hidden paths. One way or another, music has been involved in rituals for centuries, because it is the medium through which we communicate with the gods and beyond. Indeed, life itself is driven by the percussive beating of the heart.
Alchemists sense the potential of music's mystical power. Music is trance and journey, angels call on the road to the beyond. It opens doors to another dimension. For Leonardo, it might be the key, the sacred vehicle.
Few in Florence could sing or play music like Leonardo. He thought up and invented lutes, often in fanciful shapes, like a skull, a horse, or even a fish's belly. Indeed, Lorenzo
Medici.
did not consider Leonardo a painter, but a musician. Could there be a relation between Leonardo the musician and Leonardo the alchemist?
As a magician, he knew how to confound the limits of reality for his audiences at the royal courts. As an alchemist, he knew the exact emotion, weight and measure a musical note would produce on a sensitive soul. Memories of other lives, visions of the future, Leonardo pulled away at souls like a curious child trying to figure out how to take his toys apart.
For Leonardo and the Renaissance masters, the search for perfect proportions through music and the human body was a central theme. At that time, these ideas sounded esoteric. But with the passing of time and the advance of science, it became clear that Leonardo was scratching at the surface of several truths, even though he could not prove them. Because the basic musical harmonies and shapes parallel the proportions of the human body. The synthesis of this idea is the Vitruvian Man. Understanding the body and chemistry, studying the limits of life and of death, and coming up with food with an alchemist's touch. Cooking offered Leonardo numerous satisfactions, not only the pleasures of investigating and creating and mixing, but for Leonardo, cooking opened doors to both noble and common men. A table of grotesque men, with their smiling host at its head. After gathering together people with the most wretched faces imaginable, he got them drunk and began to tell jokes, one after the other, until laughter further disfigured their faces. In his mind, the artist recorded these faces with their impossible deformed shapes. Later, he would spend sleepless hours rendering every detail in charcoal and paper.
Beauty and ugliness seem to make each other more powerful. Leonardo da Vinci.
What was Leonardo looking for behind those grotesque grins? What beauty did he find in ugliness? Leonardo could not conceive of beauty without first understanding the essence of ugliness. Searching for truths through opposites, Leonardo investigated at the very point where opposites meet and a secret is revealed. Might there not be harmony in ugliness? Might the seed of death be found in life? Or perhaps only by being close to death can we catch a glimpse of life's secrets?
Everything that Leonardo painted or drew followed a logical and harmonious path. It began at his eyes. It was then meticulously dismembered in his mind, went into his heart, and finally left through his hands. Obviously transformed, made sacred. The ugly and the beautiful, the old and the young, the male and the female. And both at once. One detail at a time, Leonardo could convey the complex mechanism of a machine or the ungraspable power of a jumping horse.
It is often said that painting was Leonardo's way of life. Indeed, it was the only activity that he never abandoned. He tried all the disciplines and delved into every art form. But in the end, he spoke through the pencil and the paintbrush. It was there that with a steady hand, he filled the vast silence of the empty canvas with answers. It was there that he truly found himself.
the drawing of a witch before a mirror could almost be considered a confession of Leonardo, the alchemist. In it, a young woman is looking at herself in a mirror. If we look closely, however, we see the likeness of an old man in the figure of the young woman. Not coincidentally, this old man looks a great deal like Da Vinci. This sketch not only manifests the notion of unity, but also androgyny as the ultimate perfection of all beings. These two beings coexisted in Leonardo.
Leonardo's influence has been felt for over 5 centuries and will doubtless be felt for many more. But let's try and imagine how the power of his work must have affected his contemporaries. What did his contemporaries think about this genius? Did they see him as an outstanding artist, an esoteric rebel, or a master of alchemy? Let's take a look at the School of Athens by the renowned master Raphael, a contemporary of Leonardo's. In this painting, Raphael gives Plato the unmistakable face of Da Vinci and places him in the center of the painting as the transcendental figure of the times. Let's look in detail at this painting, an amalgamation of historical characters and times.
Raphael depicts Leonardo as Plato, with two far from coincidental characteristics. First, the hand pointing to the sky is clearly the gesture of John the Baptist. Leonardo da Vinci uses this gesture to depict John the Baptist in all his pieces. In a certain way, it manifested his secret rebellion against dogma.
But the second detail is more telling. Under his left arm, Leonardo carries a copy of Plato's Timeo, considered the Bible for alchemists. In the School of Athens, Raphael captures the spirit of the Renaissance. But more importantly for us, it proves that for his contemporaries and colleagues, Leonardo was known to practice the secret sciences of alchemy.
Investigating the dead, alchemy, the search for the mysteries of the migrating soul. Did Leonardo believe in life after death? Could it be said that he identified with the idea of reincarnation? Where could he come into contact with such ideas?
Around the year 1494, no one knew where Leonardo was. He was not seen at any of the places that he normally frequented. Though it has been said that he traveled to the east, many of his biographers doubt that fact. Leonardo's notebooks contain a thorough description of the Mount Taurus in Egypt, and there are Eastern-inspired landscapes in the background of many of his pieces from after this period. But more importantly, the East is felt in the artist's philosophy and his alchemistic sciences. Many of Leonardo's biographers also affirm that he was a vegetarian and that he professed a constant respect for animals and that he was concerned with how humans could harm nature. All of these tenets are very common in the land of the rising sun. This seems to be more than just a coincidence then, especially if we remember that there is considerable evidence suggesting that his own mother, Caterina, was a slave from the Middle East. No being ends in nothingness. Leonardo da Vinci.
The evidence accumulates, the esoteric, alchemical messages in his work, especially in the adoration of the Magi. His incessant search for the boundary between life and death. His secret visits to hospitals and morgues to portray the last moments of life and an attempt to understand death. He recorded the ugly and the grotesque in order to understand beauty in its entirety. His passion for cooking, the art of transcending the simple combination of ingredients. His work, The Vitruvian Man, clearly demonstrates his search for totality, completeness, the force of opposites. His inclination to understand music in terms of mathematics, life in terms of mechanics. His obsession with formulas and the exact proportion of all things. Are these just suspicions? Or is there something more? Just as Leonardo transformed oils and dyes into some of the most memorable works in the history of humanity, might he not have understood the quintessence of all things? Some believe that not all of Leonardo's writings have been found. Could it be that Leonardo himself destroyed them?